The mist was unusually thick that morning, curling like cold fingers around the rusted railings of Elmridge Bridge. Dew clung to the weather-worn boards as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The bridge had stood for over a century, half forgotten and rarely crossed, buried deep in the woods behind the town of Halden Creek. No one expected the jogger to scream. He was just a high school gym teacher, up before dawn, trying to shed a few pounds before the summer wedding of his niece. But when he reached the midpoint of the bridge and looked up, what he saw dangled not just from the old beams, but from the edge of reason. It was a wedding dress, white, soaking wet, torn slightly at the hem, hanging from the highest beam of the bridge like some grotesque banner. And inside it, nothing. No body, just air and the faintest scent of lilies. The town hadn't seen anything like it in years. Not since the last girl vanished. Started 6 days earlier. The morning sun cut across a pale blue sky as Emily Langford stared into the mirror, adjusting the lace around her shoulders. Her wedding was in 3 days. She should have been smiling. Instead, she looked pale, distracted, almost haunted. Her sister, Lacey, noticed it too. You look like you're about to walk into a funeral. Not down the aisle. Emily blinked. Sorry, just didn't sleep well. Lacey laughed nervously, brushing it off. You've got wedding nerves. Totally normal. But it wasn't nerves. Emily hadn't slept properly in weeks. Not since the dreams started. They always began the same way. She was walking down a narrow path in the forest behind Halden Creek. Her veil dragged behind her, catching on twigs and stones. She could hear distant laughter, childlike and echoing, but saw no one. The trees grew tighter around her until she reached the bridge, Elmridge, and there, at the center of the span, stood a woman in a wedding dress, except her face was completely wrapped in lace. No features, no eyes, just the fabric, moving slightly as if she were breathing. Then she would whisper something. Each time it was different. Once she said, "He won't wait for you." Another time, "Don't go where I went." But the last dream was worse. The last dream, she didn't whisper. She screamed, and Emily woke up with her pillow soaked in sweat and the taste of iron in her mouth. Her fiancé, Derek, thought it was just stress. He had the easy smile and steady voice of someone who didn't believe in ghosts or signs or ancient warnings. "You've been watching too many true crime docs," he chuckled when she told him about the bridge. "That place is just a pile of old wood and teen graffiti." But Emily knew, deep in her bones, she knew there was something wrong with that place. And now the dreams were starting even when she was awake. It was the third night before the wedding that the veil appeared. Lacey had come over to help her pack for the honeymoon. As they laughed and sorted swimsuits into piles, a strange knock echoed from the hallway. 3 slow taps on the glass by the front door. Emily froze. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. She rushed to the window, her pulse screaming in her ears. No one. Nothing. Only the streetlight flickering outside and the wind picking up around the trees. But when she turned around, the veil was there, lying on the couch. Her grandmother's wedding veil, the one buried with her. Lacey screamed when she saw it. "I swear it wasn't here," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know how it got in." They brought it to the church the next morning, thinking maybe it had been misplaced during the last family visit. But Father Hughes looked pale when he saw it. "This veil," he said slowly, "was never returned. It was sealed in a casket." Then he said something neither of them wanted to hear. "Sometimes the dead are disturbed when the living forget." Emily wanted to believe it was a mistake. Prank even. But that night, the dreams returned. Except this time, she wasn't alone in them. Derek was standing on the bridge too, talking to the faceless bride. And he was smiling. The next day, Emily went to the bridge. She didn't tell Lacey, or her parents, or Derek. She just needed to see it. Maybe, if she stood there, if she faced whatever this was, it would go away. The forest was colder than it should have been in spring. The path was narrower. The bridge, when she reached it, seemed longer than she remembered from childhood stories. It groaned beneath her weight. She stepped to the center and waited. Nothing. Just birds, wind, the rustling of trees like breathing lungs. Then she saw it. A white figure at the edge of the trees watching. The faceless bride. Emily called out, "What do you want?" But the figure only raised a hand and pointed downward. Emily followed the gesture with her eyes and saw something she hadn't noticed before. An engraving on the middle beam of the bridge. The wood was cracked, but the letters were still legible. "She waits beneath the wood." And suddenly, she understood something horrible. The woman wasn't warning her to stay away. She was inviting her to join. That night, Emily didn't answer her phone. Not Lacey's calls, not Derek's. Her dress was missing from the closet. Her phone was found smashed in the bathtub. Her veil was draped over her pillow. When Lacey broke into her apartment the next morning, she found the words scratched into the mirror with what looked like a fingernail. "Till death is not the end." And then, just before dawn, the jogger found it. The wedding dress, swaying lightly in the breeze, hanging from the bridge like an abandoned promise. The lace fluttered in the wind like breath. But there was something else. Tucked into the sleeve, a note, handwritten in crimson ink. "He's already mine." They closed the bridge by midday. Police tape fluttered uselessly against the wind as a few officers stood around, looking uncomfortable in the dense morning fog. No one touched the dress. Not until forensics arrived. But even then they looked disturbed. "There's no blood," one officer murmured. "No fingerprints. No fibers. It's like it was just placed there." Sheriff Matlock, a man who'd spent 30 years avoiding anything he couldn't explain, rubbed his temples and stared into the woods beyond the bridge. The trees looked darker than usual, deeper, like they were holding their breath. The sheriff didn't believe in ghosts, but he remembered the last time a girl had disappeared near this bridge. Derek was losing his mind. He hadn't slept since Emily vanished. Not really. Her parents had accused him outright, demanded to know what kind of man lets his bride-to-be just vanish days before the wedding. He didn't have an answer, because he didn't know what had happened. He should have known. He'd noticed the signs. Her pale skin, the distant look in her eyes, the cold sweat that broke across her forehead when someone mentioned the woods. But he didn't take it seriously. She kept talking about a woman in the woods, a faceless bride. She mentioned Elmridge Bridge, and he laughed it off, told her to stay away from ghost stories. Now, all he could see when he closed his eyes was her empty veil. And the note. "He's already mine." What the hell did that mean? Lacey wasn't letting this go. Unlike Derek, she didn't crumble. She fought. And she knew her sister better than anyone. Emily didn't run away. She didn't snap. Something took her. So, on the third night after the disappearance, Lacey drove out to the bridge herself. She parked 200 yards away and hiked the rest. The air was sharp, cold for spring. The trees whispered, but no animals stirred. She knew better than to call out. That only made them come faster, if the stories were true. Lacey had always mocked the town's ghost legends. She was the girl who dressed as a zombie bride for Halloween and told kids, "There's nothing under your bed except dust bunnies." But now she wasn't so sure. When she reached the center of the bridge, she crouched beside the beam. The engraving Emily had described was there. "She waits beneath the wood." Lacey touched the words with her fingers. The wood felt wrong, warmer than it should have been, almost like skin. Suddenly, a cracking sound split the silence. A twig, broken nearby. Lacey froze. "Who's there?" No answer. But then came the voice. Soft, breathless. "Leia Asi." It echoed like it came from under the bridge. She dropped to her knees and peered between the wooden slats, and saw eyes. 2 eyes, wide and glassy, staring up from the dark, unblinking, and a hand reaching toward her. She screamed and stumbled back, scraping her palms against the rough boards. When she looked again, nothing, just rushing water below. But something was clutched in her hand, a scrap of lace. Derek didn't believe Lacey at first. He said she was in shock, hallucinating. But when she showed him the lace, his breath caught. It matched Emily's dress. Not the version they bought at the boutique, but the one buried with her grandmother. A style from the 1920s. yellowed with age, too old to belong to a living bride. And yet here it was in Lacey's palm. That night, Derek did something he hadn't done since he was 12. He went to visit Father Hughes. The church was quiet, dimly lit by flickering votive candles. Father Hughes sat in the pews, clutching a rosary, his face pale and drawn. "You've seen her," the priest said before Derek could speak. Derek blinked. "What?" "The bride. She visits those who are marked. Emily was marked. And now, so are you." Derek sat slowly, hands trembling. "Tell me what's going on, please." Father Hughes let out a slow, shaky breath. "It started decades ago, maybe longer. Every few years, a girl vanishes before her wedding. Sometimes they're never found. Other times," he looked up, his eyes wet, "they find the dress, hanging like an omen, like a warning." "The woman in white," Derek whispered. "She was real once," the priest continued. "A girl named Celeste Morvan, betrothed to a wealthy man who humiliated her on her wedding day, never showed up. She walked to the bridge and jumped." Derek stared at the floor. "But the story didn't end there," Hughes added. "The legend says her body was never found, that she haunts the woods now, taking brides, wearing their veils, stealing their place. She believes every wedding is hers." Derek's skin prickled. "Emily saw her," Hughes finished. "And once you see her, she sees you too." The nightmares began that night. Derek woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding. He was standing at the altar in the dream, waiting. The church was packed, but the faces of the guests were all blurred, melting, dripping like wax. The music began, and Emily walked down the aisle, only it wasn't Emily. The dress was black. The veil covered her face. Her hands were skeletal, covered in dried mud. And as she reached him, she whispered, "I do." He tried to run, but his feet were nailed to the floor. The candles flickered and turned blue. And as she lifted her veil, he woke up screaming. Lacey had made a decision. She was going back to the bridge. But this time she wasn't going alone. She convinced Derek to come with her. Together they'd dig, search, investigate. She didn't care how insane it sounded. Emily wasn't gone. Not yet. And maybe, just maybe, they could bring her back. They returned at dusk. Shovels, flashlights, a pack of Old Town records stolen from the library. They found an old map showing what lay beneath the bridge. A dried-out hollow that used to be a watermill, long abandoned and forgotten. Local lore said Celeste's family lived nearby. Her spirit was rumored to haunt the ruins. They climbed beneath the bridge, careful not to fall into the creek. The water was shallow now, the stones slick with moss. That's when they found the door, hidden behind a thick tangle of roots, half-rotted and wedged into the stone. Derek pried it open. The hinges screamed. Inside, a narrow staircase descended into darkness. "Are we really doing this?" he asked. Lacey nodded. "She's down there. I can feel it." They lit a lantern and stepped into the dark. The walls were stone, slick with condensation. Old carvings marked the passage, most too worn to read. But one stood out. A woman etched into the wall, mouth open in a scream, a veil covering her face. Lacey shuddered. They reached the bottom. A chamber opened before them, circular. And at the center, surrounded by rotting bouquets, lay a stone altar. And on it a mirror, cracked, old, covered in dirt. As Derek stepped closer, he saw something written on the glass. "Give me the groom and she is free." His breath caught. "No!" The mirror fogged over. A shadow appeared in the reflection. Long limbs, a face hidden in lace. And behind her, Emily, standing still, silent, her eyes begging. The figure in white raised a hand and pointed at Derek. Lacey screamed, "Don't look!" But it was too late. Derek's reflection changed. His eyes turned black. Blood poured from his nose in the glass. And then his reflection smiled. The chamber trembled. The lantern flickered. A low hum began to rise, like 1,000 voices whispering beneath the earth. Derek turned, pale as snow. "We have to go. Now." They ran. back up the stairs, through the door, out into the cold night air. But something followed. They could feel it, a pressure behind them, a dragging sound on the stones. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Only then did Lacey dare look back, and saw her, the faceless bride, standing at the edge of the trees, veil fluttering, dress dripping wet, watching, waiting. That night, another note appeared on Derek's front door, written in smudged lipstick. You were always meant to be mine. The next morning, Derek couldn't breathe. Not metaphorically, literally. He jolted awake, clawing at his throat, lungs refusing to take in air. A pressure like water pressing down on his chest, crushing him, suffocating him. He staggered to the bathroom mirror. Across his neck were faint red lines, shaped like fingers, long skeletal fingers. A whisper echoed in the back of his head. You promised. He collapsed on the bathroom floor, wheezing, soaked in sweat. And somewhere, beneath the floor, beneath the town itself, he could still hear her veil dragging along the ground. Lacey had been researching all night. Old records, forgotten journals, newspaper clippings from the 1800s. She found something, an article barely legible in the microfilm archives from the Halden Creek Gazette, dated 1889. Miss Celeste Morvan, 23, was found dead in the woods near Elmridge Bridge after her fiancé failed to appear on their wedding day. Villagers report strange sightings near the area. A woman in white, wandering beneath the trees, whispering vows to no one. Several young brides in subsequent years vanished under similar circumstances. Locals began calling it the bride's curse. But buried in a scribbled margin was a note, likely written by the journalist or an editor. They say she waits for a groom who won't run, someone who'll finish the vow. If she finds one, she'll let the stolen bride go. Lacey's stomach dropped. Give me the groom and she is free. That mirror message wasn't metaphorical. Celeste didn't want Derek dead. She wanted him married. Derek paced the floor, the weight of what he'd seen, heard, and felt dragging at his sanity. The second time he saw Emily in a dream, she didn't speak. She simply held out her hand, and blood ran down her dress. The same faceless bride loomed behind her, wrapping a veil around Emily's mouth like a gag, dragging her backward into the shadows. And Derek just stood there, helpless. He knew it now. This wasn't about murder. This was about ritual, about claiming. Celeste didn't want revenge. She wanted a wedding. Lacey banged on his door that morning, wild-eyed and breathless. We need to talk. Derek let her in, noting the stack of papers in her arms. She slammed them onto the table. She's been doing this for centuries. Always the same pattern. Lonely, jilted, desperate for what she never got. She finds a bride. And if the groom doesn't come for her, she keeps the bride forever. Derek slumped into a chair. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Marry a ghost? Lacey didn't laugh. She didn't blink. I think you might have to. The church was empty. Dust-covered pews. Cold stone floors. It had been shut down for repairs, but Father Hughes gave them a key for emergencies. Though he made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with what they were planning. You're playing with something older than sin, he'd whispered. Now, Derek stood at the altar, heart hammering against his ribs, staring at the dark entryway as Lacey lit what few candles were still usable. Are you really going to say the vows? She asked. Derek swallowed. If it's the only way to get Emily back, yes. Lacey handed him a wedding ring. I got this from Grandma's jewelry box. It's not real gold, but it's something. He nodded, trying to ignore the chill crawling up his spine. They waited. The church remained silent, until, at exactly midnight, the doors creaked open, and she entered, Celeste Morvan. The air dropped 10 degrees. The candles flickered. The scent of old roses filled the space like smoke. Her gown trailed behind her, soaked and stained. Her veil covered her face, but beneath it, something shimmered, like black water reflecting moonlight. No footsteps, no sound. She simply glided toward him. Derek stepped forward. I'm here, he said, voice cracking. I won't run. She stopped. Slowly, her head tilted, acknowledging him. She raised her hand. And Emily appeared, bound in a veil, kneeling in the aisle behind Celeste. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her eyes begged, pleaded. Derek's hands shook. "Let her go," he whispered. Celeste extended her arms. A bouquet of rotted flowers materialized in her hand. Derek took them. The wind howled outside. Thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. And then he began. "I, Derek Winters, take thee." Celeste trembled. Her veil fluttered. "To be my wedded wife." A shriek split the silence. Not from Celeste, but from Emily. She collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach. The veil on her face began to tighten like a noose. "Derek, stop!" Lacey shouted. "It's a trick. She's feeding off the vow." He froze. Celeste's head turned toward Lacey, snapping at an unnatural angle. And suddenly the candles went out. Darkness swallowed them. Derek felt something cold wrap around his hand. The fingers icy, bone-thin. Celeste's voice, soft and hollow, echoed inside his skull. "Finish it, and she is yours forever." But another voice rang out, this time from Lacey. "Don't. Look at Emily. Look." And he did. Through the darkness, he saw Emily crawling toward him. Blood ran from her mouth. Her arms were bent at impossible angles. But her eyes locked with his. And in them, he saw one word. "Don't." Derek turned back toward Celeste. "I revoke the vow." Silence. Then a scream. Celeste's form burst into shadows, swirling, shrieking, slamming into the walls. The church shook. The crucifix behind the altar cracked down the middle. And Emily screamed. Her body lifted from the floor as if invisible hands were tearing her apart. Derek rushed to her, grabbing her hand. "Hold on. I've got you." But the veil was still tightening, choking her. The lace burrowed into her skin like roots. And then, Lacey lit the last candle. The flame flared white. Celeste let out a scream that didn't sound human. A howl of rage, sorrow, and centuries of pain. And she vanished. The veil fell away from Emily's face. She gasped. Alive. They collapsed in the church, shaking, sobbing, and covered in scratches and bruises. Emily couldn't speak at first. She just held on to Derek like a drowning woman pulled from the sea. "I saw her," she whispered finally. "I was in her world, beneath the bridge. It was endless, dark. She wanted me to wear the dress, to say the vows. But she needed you to finish them." Derek held her closer. "Never. I'm yours. Always." Lacey stood nearby, holding the last piece of the lace veil. She dropped it to the floor and crushed it beneath her boot. But the story doesn't end there. Because some nights, when the fog rolls in thick over Halden Creek, locals swear they still see a figure in white standing on Elmridge Bridge. Not Celeste. Someone else. A shadow. Watching. Waiting. Maybe it's Emily's echo. Maybe it's another soul who didn't make it back. Or maybe the veil was never truly destroyed. 2 weeks passed. Emily hadn't spoken about what happened beneath the bridge since that night in the church. She told Derek she remembered only flashes. The smell of damp lace, the feel of water in her lungs, the constant whisper of the bride's voice inside her mind. "I felt her inside me," she said once, staring out the window. "Like I wasn't me anymore." Lacey wanted her to talk to a therapist. Emily refused. "She's not gone," she said one night. "I can feel her watching me." Derek tried to reassure her, but he saw it too. The way the lights flickered when she entered a room. The mirror in their bedroom fogging up with no one around. And once, he woke in the middle of the night to find Emily standing at the window, whispering vows to the dark. Meanwhile, Lacey couldn't sleep. The final piece of the veil, the one she thought she'd destroyed, was back. It had reappeared on her bedroom dresser. Folded. Clean. Like it had never touched rot or blood. She threw it out again. Came back. This time, there was a note tucked inside. She said yes. "So did you." She burned it, and woke up with a blister shaped like a ring around her finger. Lacey went back to Father Hughes. But when she arrived, The church doors were open. Inside, the pews were scattered, candles crushed on the floor. The altar was scorched, and on the far wall, written in thick, dark letters, "You broke the vow. Now I choose." Hughes was gone. All they found was his rosary, still warm. Emily's condition began to worsen. She stopped eating. Her skin turned pale and waxy. She said she could hear the veil moving, even when she was awake. "It's always behind me," she whispered to Derek, "like something dragging on the floor. It's waiting for you to say yes." One night, Derek followed her. He awoke at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of the front door creaking open. Emily was barefoot, walking across the lawn in her nightgown, eyes closed. She made her way toward the woods near Elmridge. He called out to her, but she didn't react, just kept walking, hands out like a sleepwalker. He caught up and grabbed her arm, cold as ice. Suddenly, she opened her mouth, and another voice came out. "Say it, or I'll wear her skin forever." Emily collapsed. They had no choice. Lacey knew what it meant. The ritual wasn't over. They had interrupted it, but not ended it. Celeste had marked Derek as hers, and when he broke the vow, she retaliated. Now she would choose her own groom, or her own bride. The veil, once a cursed object, was now a weapon, parasite, and it had attached itself to Emily. Lacey made one final decision. She would end this. There was an old woman, Isolde, who lived just outside town. She was a recluse, but rumors claimed her family had lived in Halden Creek for generations. Some said she was a witch. Others said she was Celeste's only living descendant. Lacey found her in a crumbling cottage, surrounded by dead flowers and moth-eaten curtains. "I know why you've come," Isolde said without turning. Lacey stood in the doorway, shivering. "She's not after Derek anymore," the old woman murmured. "She's changed her target." Lacey blinked. "What do you mean?" Isolde finally turned. Her eyes were white with cataracts, but they saw everything. "She wants you." Lacey stepped back. "Why me?" "You helped break the vow. You lit the final flame. You ended the ritual before she could fully bind Derek. Now she's unraveling. And in her rage, she's rewritten the story." Isolde limped toward a dusty trunk in the corner. She doesn't want to wait anymore. She doesn't want a groom. She opened the trunk and pulled out a box wrapped in stained linen. She wants a bride. Inside was a mirror, small, handheld. The surface was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. "Look into it," Isolde said. "If she's chosen you, you'll see her." Lacey hesitated, then looked. First, it was just her own face, pale, tired. Then, the cracks in the glass began to bleed. And behind her reflection, a figure in a black wedding dress. No veil, just a gaping maw where the face should be. Lacey dropped the mirror. It shattered on the floor. "She'll come for you on the next new moon," Isolde said softly. "Unless you bind her." Lacey trembled. "How?" Isolde stared. "You offer yourself, in place of every bride she's taken, and finish the vow she never got." The night of the new moon came faster than expected. Emily was unconscious now. Doctors couldn't explain it. No injuries, no illness, just asleep. But the heart monitor beeped slower each day, as if her soul were drifting further from her body. Derek sat beside her, eyes bloodshot, holding her hand. Lacey stood in the doorway of the hospital room, holding the box Isolde had given her. Inside, a silver ring, a withered bouquet, and a piece of Celeste's original veil, stolen from her grave decades ago and hidden by Isolde's ancestors. "You don't have to do this," Derek said, but Lacey just smiled faintly. "I think I already did." That night, Lacey returned to Elmridge Bridge. She wore a wedding dress, not hers, Celeste's. The air was cold, still, not a sound from the trees, no birds, no wind, just silence. She stood at the center of the bridge, facing the woods, and lit a single black candle. "I'm ready," she whispered. Fog rolled across the bridge. Then footsteps. From the mist emerged Celeste, no longer hiding her face. Now her veil was lifted, Lacey saw her true form, a hollow skull, lips sewn shut, eyes that bled tears of ink. But somehow she was smiling. "You came," the bride hissed. "I'm here to finish it," Lacey said, her voice trembling but steady. Celeste circled her like a predator. Lacey knelt, opened the book Isolde gave her, recited the vow. "I offer myself in place of the stolen brides. I give this vow freely without fear or deceit. I take the name of sorrow and wear the veil of the forgotten." The wind screamed. Celeste stopped moving, her face contorted not in rage, but confusion. "You give yourself?" the voice echoed. "Willingly." "Yes," Lacey said. Celeste reached out, touching Lacey's cheek with an icy hand. And for a moment, she was beautiful again. A real bride, young, alive. The wind died, the fog cleared, and from somewhere behind the veil, a voice whispered, "Thank you." In the hospital, Emily sat up, eyes wide, gasping for breath. Monitors beeped wildly. Derek rushed to her, sobbing. "She's gone," Emily whispered. "Lacey." Lacey gave her what she wanted. They found her the next morning. Lacey, standing on the bridge, eyes closed, a smile on her lips. She wasn't breathing, but in her hands, she held a bouquet of fresh white roses, and she was wearing a wedding ring. They buried her on the hill above the town. People say the grass never grew on her grave. But every year, on the night of the new moon, someone leaves a single white veil on her headstone. Sometimes they say you can hear wedding bells in the wind. And if you stand alone on Elmridge Bridge and whisper, "I do," someone might whisper back. To be continued in Part 5, Final Part. Let me know when you're ready for the conclusion. The final part will deliver the ultimate twist. 1 year later, the town of Halden Creek moved on. Sort of. Emily and Derek left, packed their things and headed south, to a coastal town where fog didn't cling to the trees and bridges didn't whisper at night. They never spoke publicly about what happened. The official story was simple. Lacey died of sudden cardiac arrest. A tragedy, but not a mystery, except for the part where she was found in a century-old wedding dress no one could explain. Smiling, bouquet in hand, like she'd just walked out of her own funeral rehearsal. But behind closed doors, Emily knew better, because sometimes she still heard the veil dragging. The nightmares came back, started small, a faint giggle in the middle of the night, the smell of roses when none were around, reflections in the bathroom mirror that lingered after she moved. Then came the veil. It appeared at the foot of their bed, just once, folded neatly. Emily screamed when she saw it, but Derek didn't see anything at all. Emily visited Lacey's grave alone the following spring. A veil had been left again, this time with a message stitched into the lace. "You gave me peace. I offer you the same." She didn't understand at first. But that night, when she returned home, her dreams changed. No more skulls, no more drowning, just Lacey, dressed in white, standing by a river. "Tell them the truth," she said. Emily began recording everything. The rituals, the history, Celeste's story, Lacey's sacrifice. She wanted it documented not just for closure, but for protection. So the next person who felt the cold tug of the veil wouldn't be blindsided. The first night she shared it online, her computer shut down twice. Her webcam flickered, then locked her screen in a frozen frame of her own face, smiling. Except, she wasn't smiling when she took the picture. Then the whispers began again. Only now they weren't Celeste's. Emily began to hear Lacey, first soft, then clear, and what she said chilled Emily to the core. She didn't leave. Derek thought Emily was unraveling, said she needed rest, a break, therapy. Emily didn't disagree, but she knew. She started going back through her audio files, recordings she'd made at the church, the bridge, even whispered monologues into her phone when she couldn't sleep. And there, buried beneath the layers, under static white noise, even her own breathing was a second voice. Not Celeste, not Lacey, something older. It repeated the same sentence in every file. "The veil is not the curse. It's the key." Emily returned to Halden Creek. alone. The town was quieter than ever. Businesses had closed. Locals muttered that something was off in the air, like the trees were listening. She walked to the old church. Locked, but the back window had long since broken. She climbed through. Dust coated the pews. The altar was still scorched from that final night. And in the center aisle, right where Celeste had once appeared, was a new dress. Fresh, white, perfect, not tattered or bloody. Brand new. A tag hung from it. Say yes. Emily didn't run. She sat in the front pew and waited. Darkness settled in. The windows fogged. And from the shadows behind the altar, a woman emerged. Not Celeste. Not fully. It was Lacey. But her face was wrong. Smiling too wide. Eyes black and bottomless. Wearing the same dress she was buried in, but altered, threaded with strands of dark lace that pulsed like veins. Lacey, Emily whispered. The figure tilted its head. You never asked what happened to the other brides, it said. And then it was no longer Lacey. The face melted, shifted, became dozens. A girl in a 1950s veil. Another in 1910 lace gloves. A child no older than 15, bouquet in hand, eyes empty. Each face bled into the next, then back to Lacey's. She let her in, the voice crooned. She opened the door. She thought she could contain it, but she became the vessel. Emily trembled. The vessel for what? The figure stepped forward. For the bride before Celeste. The one the town forgot. The one who wasn't jilted, but buried alive beneath the bridge. The veil was not Celeste's curse. It was her inheritance. A thing passed down from bride to bride. Feeding. Adapting. Celeste had tried to end it by finding a groom. Lacey had tried to bind it with sacrifice. But the veil always returned. Because the original bride, unnamed, unremembered, had never been freed. She had become the veil. And now, she wanted a new face. The church began to shake. The crucifix snapped again. Stained glass shattered. A wind blew in from nowhere, carrying whispers and sobs and the rustle of endless lace. Emily rose. You want me? She shouted. Then I choose to remember you. Silence. She walked toward the altar. You were buried. Forgotten. But I remember now. She placed her hand on the veil draped over the dress, and spoke the words Isolde had taught her. In the name of the first bride, I break the silence. I lift the veil not to wed, but to witness. I name you. I see you. The wind howled. The candles burst. And the entity shrieked. Not in rage, but in release. In the morning, they found Emily sitting in the church, unharmed. The dress was gone. So was the veil. And every mirror in town had shattered. Lacey's grave bloomed. Roses. Dozens of them. All white. All fresh. Her headstone was different now. Someone, no one knows who, had etched a new inscription into the stone. Here lies the last bride to say yes. May no one ever need to again. Emily left Halden Creek for good. But she kept one thing. The journal. Inside it, she wrote the names of every woman who'd worn the veil. And on the last page, if you ever find a wedding dress where it doesn't belong, don't touch it, don't wear it, and never say yes.